I'm Murray Stein, and I'm with Riccardo Bernardini, who will be the presenter at the Zurich Lecture Series 2025. Riccardo's topic will be The Art of the Self, the Blue Book of Olga Frebe-Kapteyn, founder of Eranos. So I want to introduce you to Riccardo, and I'm going to let him speak for himself. Riccardo, can you tell us something about yourself, something about your background and where you come from?
Thanks, first of all, to Murray Stein and to the International School of Analytical Psychology for this generous invitation. The prospect of speaking on topics dear to me, related both to the history of Eranos and the art of our founder, Mrs. Olga Fröbe-Kapteyn, is always a special privilege. My interest in the history of Eranos and C.G. Jung and in the evolution of the practice of analytical psychology through the study of archival accounts attest the specificity of my path of study, which has always been articulated between two fields, psychology and religious sciences. My training in psychology in particular took place in Turin, Italy, under the guidance of Jungian analysts since my university years. My bachelor's thesis in psychology was devoted to the study of the connections between, on the one hand, Monte Verità, the mountain of truth, the anarchist community in Ascona, Italian Switzerland, which took place at the beginning of the 20th century as an alternative to the industrialized Western world, and on the other hand, the Eranos conferences, which a few decades later would have a decisive influence on in the development of analytical psychology. That study, still embryonic, had led me to discover a passion for researching unpublished archival sources, and also the importance of collecting live testimony through interviews and meetings. I then refined my studies in Bologna, Italy, with a PhD in religious studies dedicated to Jung's involvement in the Eranos project. And from here, through a period of research lasting about 10 years, originated my most comprehensive book to date on the subject, Jung at Eranos, the Project of Complex Psychology. Then, parallel to my religious studies, I also began my clinical profession as a psychologist, my psychotherapeutic training, and therefore my analytical training. I also became interested in the possibility of studying Jung according to an empirical approach acceptable to contemporary university culture. I thus achieved a second PhD in Turin, devoted this time to the study of the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which allowed me to understand in depth the evolution, as we know, controversial but also quite interesting, of Jung's theory of psychological types after Jung. Having become a Jungian analyst, I have continued to practice analytically both in Turin and in Ivrea, which is a beautiful small town in a mountainous area of Piedmont. Piedmont is a region of North Italy, where I also created in 2017 a postgraduate school in psychotherapy, the Institute of Analytical Psychology and Psychotherapy. At present, in addition to directing this institute and taking care of the Eranos Foundation, I also keep a teaching position at the University of Turin on a particular topic, which is the psychology of evil and the radicalization processes. This allows me to continue to pass on Jung's teaching to young psychology students, but with a special focus on the validity of Jung's reflections for understanding some tragic problems of our contemporary times.
Thank you, Riccardo. Such a rich history you have, your intellectual background, all your studies and training on these topics are fascinating. Now, when you come to Zurich for the lecture series, the Zurich lecture series next year, what will be the focus of your lectures and your book? Because you will also present a book at the same time, which we hope will be published and ready for sale when you're here in October. But can you just say a few words about what you're going to speak about?
Yes, the topic of my lecture will be The Art of the Self, the Blue Book of Olga Fröbe-Kaptein, founder of Eranos. In the case of C.G. Jung, who was among the main inspirers of the Eranos conferences held in Ascona, the publication of the Liber Novus or the Red Book, as well as even more recently of the Art of C.G. Jung and of his Black Books, helped to further highlight the connection between his personal life, his imaginative world, and the construction of his scientific thought. Until now, some allusions by Mrs. Fröbe-Kaptein, the creator of the Eranos Symposia, about the link between life and work, have instead sounded to us less comprehensible. For example, she stated, the story of Eranos can be found in an unwritten book, which I often leaf through, read, examine, and compare. I also look at the pictures, since there are many of them in the book, and search for the connections that form the whole in a meaningful and unifying way. The overall figure, the pattern that becomes visible, is so twisted and intertwined with the pattern of my life that is indeed difficult to separate them. Mrs. Fröbe-Kaptein's words become clearer today in light of her unpublished anthology of artworks, which, as Eranos Foundation, we normally rubricate under the name Blue Book, traceable to two different periods. A first phase of paintings is inherent in a series of about 127 meditation plates between 1926 and 1934. So mostly made before Mrs. Fröbe's encounter with Jung. Those images are expressed through a geometric rigor, eschewing any naturalism of form and a choice of predominantly cold colors, where we can note a basic color contrast between black, nocturnal, unconscious, and destructive energy, and gold, diurnal, conscious, and constructive energy, with a constant presence of red, and almost always on a blue background. Mrs. Fröbe's artistic practice gradually changed from the early 30s as a result, in fact, of her meeting with Jung, her deepening of analytical psychology, and the maturation of her intellectual relationship with other scholars, her artistic production, in fact, increasingly turned toward a figurative style that recalled the active imagination, to which the works of the second period can be traced. A collection of more than 300 visions arranged in 12 blue-bound albums, drawn between 1934 and 1938. These are, of course, the crucial years of the start of Aaron's cultural enterprise, of Mrs. Fröbe's enduring intellectual relationship with Jung, and also her search for iconographic material entrusted to her by Jung himself, which led to the creation of the Aaron's Archive for research on symbolism. Mrs. Fröbe believed that, I'm quoting her, the deepest things in human life can only be expressed in images. So we believe, and this is what I will try to show to our colleagues in Zurich next year, Olga Fröbe attempted in documenting in her blue book the forms of a creative imagination, the imagination of an independent subjectivity, the imagination of a woman capable of holding together the identities of mother, scholar, artist, and spiritualist. Because of the care with which it was drawn, collected, and preserved, Olga Fröbe-Captain perhaps hoped that her blue book would survive her and also allow to the generations that would follow her to rediscover and make it their own, as a special attestation of that endless search for the self, personal and universal, that Jung would theorize, of course, with the idea of individuation process. More specifically, in the 5 lectures that I will hold in Zurich, in addition to sketching a biographical profile of Olga Fröbe-Captain, there aren't biographical studies dedicated to her at now, and also reconstructing her relationship with Jung, which is still almost unknown. We will focus on the close link between her individuation process and the paintings, the images that express it through her visionary art. We will also try to relate Olga Fröbe-Captain's blue book to the pictorial production of other of Jung's patients, in the idea of identifying both similarities and differences, and also to derive some hopefully useful reflections for our analytical practice and for the use of artistic material in the clinical dimension.
Well, we're really looking forward to having you with us, Riccardo. And, you know, at the same time that you're here, there will be an exhibition at the Landesmuseum in Zurich honoring Jung's 150th birthday next year. The vernissage, the opening of that exhibition will take place on the day that you are lecturing here in October. And so on that evening, we can step over to the Landesmuseum after your lectures and attend the vernissage with a group of people from ISAP, and it should be very exciting. As I understand it, some of Olga's paintings will also be on display at the exhibition. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Mrs. Fröbe's paintings are attracting the attention and the interest by some of the most important museums in the world.
Oh,
Since about 10 years, I mentioned the Centre Pompidou in Paris, the New Museum in New York, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. Currently, there is an important exhibition set up in Locarno at Casa Rusca dedicated to her. Last year in Germany, the Unstalle Mainz dedicated a monographic exhibition to Mrs. Fröbe. And next year, a number of her active imagination paintings, the visions, will also be shown at the Landesmuseum in Zurich.
well, the art of the self, that is your theme, and we are certainly looking forward to it. I'm sure we'll have a very good turnout for your lectures, and we are already beginning to prepare everything for your reception. So I can welcome you in advance, Riccardo, and thank you for accepting this invitation to come to Zurich and deliver the Zurich lectures next year, 2025. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Murray. I'm looking forward to share new discoveries with our colleagues in Zurich next year. Thank you.
Yes, yes.